Max Verstappen.
And that's the show.
Yeah.
Did Max Verstappen, the winner of the Miami Grand Prix for the second year in a row, give you these parting gifts on your heads?
He didn't specifically, but the team said we could have them, with the caveat being we have to wear them post-race if they won. And now I figured that's a pretty safe bet for them that they were going to win. You know, one of them was going to win it. And it proved to be true.
They were trying to get us to wear them on the grid, but that's where we drew the line. That's where professionalism comes
of course.
I said,
journalist.
you cannot.
You're a journalist, and
my
I respect
integrity
that, yeah.
is too much for me to accept that. But I will do it after the race.
And for anyone listening on the podcast, we should probably explain that Nate is wearing the Red Bull Limited Edition Miami bucket hat. I am wearing the weird golf visor thing, which I don't think anyone has seen since
You
1982
look like
or
a Dolphins head coach, so it's fitting. Yeah.
Okay.
Big football
is that what they
thing.
were?
I was
Okay.
gonna go struggling Danish golf professional.
Maybe
Yeah.
That I will
day.
take.
day,
The word professional is enough to
Thank you,
to make me take that one on. Yeah, that's great.
Katie George, Nate Saunders, Laurence Edmondson, and our special guest, Spencer Hall, who we sadly couldn't get a mic flag. Do you feel special?
Yes, the nude mic always makes me feel special.
Let's get into it. Max Verstappen, the story coming into the Miami Grand Prix was a little slip up during Q3 in qualifying the day before. He started P9 and made quick work of slicing through every driver in his path, ultimately overtaking his teammate as well to win the Miami Grand Prix. Now, Sergio Perez started on pole. I'm curious your thoughts, Laurence, on the different strategies the team went for both drivers.
So they said their simulations suggested that Perez's strategy was actually the faster one. Max knew that starting from 9th, he probably needed to do something different if he was going to stand a chance of winning the race. And so he went with the hard tyres and then the medium. Him and his engineer were pretty convinced that that was the right way to go. Obviously, they were correct. Christian Horner had to sign it off to make sure there was no disputes within the team afterwards over who had the best strategy, who had the worst one. But going into the race, they genuinely felt that Checo's one was better. So what changed? Well, part of it was just Max being brilliant, and he really made it work. That long stint on the hard tyres, towards the end of it, he was still putting in ridiculously fast lap times for tyres of that age and that compound. And that was the key to victory. The other thing we should say probably is that Checo, I know he got pole position, but he was never really that comfortable with the car the whole weekend. And I think that was the difference, is that this was a racetrack that Max was really good at. He just made that mistake in qualifying. Then there was the red flag. That left him in 9th. Otherwise, he would have probably started from pole, done the medium hard thing, and won anyway.
Spencer, do you feel like it was a disappointing day for Sergio Perez?
On balance, no, because he was still second, and because that's where he should be. I think maybe our expectations of what he's capable of and where he is in the team in terms of the overall power scheme of Red Bull, I think they've been distorted by the past couple of weeks because we're looking for something interesting. But on the whole, if I told you this is the way it was going to play out today before the season started, you'd go, oh, yeah, sure, that makes total sense. So, I don't want to get too lost in the present, right? He lost position, but he lost position to Max Verstappen.
Right.
That's fine. That's fine as an F1 driver.
I thought it was interesting coming into the race. Caesars Sportsbook had put the over-under for Sergio Perez wins this year at 1.5. He's already hit the over, and we're 5 races in. The Red Bull obviously is unbelievable, but are we not giving him the credit that he's due as a driver? Is he just in such good form right now?
Yeah, I think that speaks to kind of some of the struggles he's had over the past 2 seasons and how good Max has been since they've been teammates. Yeah, I'm surprised they put it that low, to be honest with you, because I think we've seen he's got better and better and better. I think with with Sergio, the issue he's got is that on most weekends, Spencer said, finishing second is no thing to be ashamed of. Problem is, the other guy in the other car is probably the best driver in F1 right now. And, you've got to contend with that every weekend. So I think he'll probably get a handful, if you're being honest. I'd love him to get 10, because that would mean there'd be a championship fight. But I think Perez against most other drivers, I think, would be a legitimate title contender. I think he's just very unlucky that, similar to what Bottas had with Hamilton, you're going up against a generational talent, and Barrichello had it with Schumacher, Webber had it with Vettel. You have these characters in Formula One that sometimes are good drivers, but they're just not quite as good as the guys they're up against. So I think that's, pardon me, I don't know what happened there. This
has been a long weekend.
It has been a long weekend.
Yeah.
I think I've got some dust from all the packing up that's going on around here. But yeah, nothing to be ashamed of. But I think that the realistic expectation for Checo is a guy that's going to win you a few races probably not going to win you enough to be champion as a standalone champ himself.
With fastest lap, Max Verstappen is now 14 points ahead of his teammate in the drivers' standings. Red Bull, obviously, by far and away ahead in the Constructors' Championship. Fernando Alonso seemed pretty pleased post-race in media, finishing P3 after starting P2. Lance Stroll made up 6 positions after kind of a diabolical situation yesterday. How do you feel like Aston feels about their performance this weekend?
The performance was in the car. What went wrong with Lance in qualifying was that he tried to make it through Q1 on one set of soft tyres. Now that is a sign of how confident they were, because to do that with the track ramping up the way it was during qualifying is incredibly difficult. You need to get a lap completely hooked up. He didn't get it, and then that's the difference, But again, look, Fernando Alonso, you put him in a car that's kind of competitive, he's going to get the best result out of it. And at the moment, there's a real fine line between the Mercedes, the Ferrari, the Aston Martin. I would say the Ferrari is probably the fastest over a single lap. I think if we'd had a qualifying session without a red flag, although it was caused by a Ferrari, but if we'd had one without, and you'd had just the best lap from each car, the Ferrari probably would have been ahead of the Aston Martin. But in the race, it all turns around, and you've got the Aston Martin being quicker. The Mercedes actually looked way better in the race. And so, at the moment, that battle is so tight. But the one man that keeps getting the best out of his machinery is Fernando Alonso.
Let's follow the Ferrari thread. Carlos Sainz posted quickly after the race, tough weekend for us. Spencer, what did you make of Carlos finishing P5 and Charles Leclerc starting in P7 and finishing in the same spot?
Can I just call this like 2 degrees of underwhelm? Right? Like, I don't want to say like massively underwhelming, but like, can I just give you 2 little notches on the dial of underwhelm? Because that's about where they are, right? If I told you that they had finished like 4th and 6th, if I told you they finished 3rd and 5th, that would be slightly better. This is where Ferrari lives at this point, right? Is that we go 2 degrees of underwhelm, 2 degrees of overperformance. They're always going to be right here at good. That seems to be where they're stuck right now, right? And where they'll probably be for the rest of the season, particularly with, like, I think we might take a few more degrees of underwhelm if the upgrades at Mercedes measure up to anything like what they are supposed to be. Then obviously they're going to look worse in comparison, because our expectations are a zero-sum game, right? We cannot say good things about Mercedes without taking some chips away from Ferrari. That's just inevitable.
What do you think happened with Charles Leclerc? Because obviously some people were able to make overtakes around him in that train, but unfortunately he stayed in the same spot.
Yeah, it was a strange weekend for him. Obviously went very aggressive with the approach to that last lap in qualifying. And it was, he wasn't helped at the end. Obviously, he was on a different strategy to Lewis, who was able to come through on better tyres. So I don't think he really had any chance in that fight. But yeah, he seemed, whenever we saw Charles, he was just kind of stuck in either a DRS train, or he had that weird fight with Magnussen where, Magnussen, I know there were different tyre strategies at play, but you wouldn't expect a Haas to be fighting Charlotte there. He got him straight back, but it was just bizarre, and you looked at it and you thought that's not kind of the fighting Charles that you usually see. So I don't know. I don't know whether he seemed, when we spoke to him here a few hours ago, he just he looked as dejected as you've seen him. We keep joking that he's going to go and write another absolute classic on the piano, but like that seems to be where he's at right now. Just very, very. I don't even think like miserable is the word. I think he's just really deflated, and I don't know whether that ties into how he races. I think these guys are all professional and they're good at leaving a lot of that at the door, but it must affect you in some way. You wouldn't be human if it didn't. So I think there's some of that.
I wanted to ask you about that, and Lawrence as well. He never seemed comfortable this weekend.
Yeah.
He didn't seem comfortable in the car, didn't seem comfortable with the track, bouncing all over the place, having serious issues with it. Not to give him credit where credit isn't due, but like, I didn't think once you saw him finish 7th, and I heard he ended up finishing 7th, right? I didn't think it, I was like, okay, that's getting through this weekend. Like, he was clearly uncomfortable and just was like, I'm going to stay right here. I think that's why he was in a fight with the Haas, is that I don't think he felt like he could be aggressive given how he felt with the car. Yeah,
he locked himself into what he said was quite an aggressive setup for qualifying, and I think Ferrari were quite confident coming into this race weekend. They felt it was a track that was going to suit them. And I think in his mind, he thought, well, if I go super aggressive and have this really twitchy car in qualifying, maybe I can, even get amongst the Red Bulls like he did in Baku. Maybe at least I can be third on the grid and then just take it from there and hope that he can hold everyone off. And obviously it went wrong in qualifying in such a big way. But don't forget, he had an accident in practice, he had an accident in qualifying. When you have big hits like that, big shunts like that, it's going to chip away at your confidence, And also, the mechanics have got to start putting the car back together. And as good as these mechanics are, sometimes, the car isn't quite right, isn't quite as perfect as it was when it first rolled out the pits on Friday morning. So I think there were quite a few things, quite a few setbacks to his whole weekend, and that's what happens. Nate made a very good point. I think it was after qualifying. Is that is Leclerc good enough to be a world champion driving like this? And it's not the first time we've seen it. He always is right on that very limit, which is why it's so exciting to watch.
Yeah.
But it's also the question mark over him of whether he's really on the level of Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso.
Because with those guys, you never see these weekends, really. I know Lewis has had a few weekends where he hasn't looked off it, but he often comes back through, and it's very rare to see that. So it is concerning. If you're Ferrari, you're probably looking at it right now. You've obviously Carlos Sainz, I think you were saying about the degrees of underwhelm. I think Sainz is good at turning that right up sometimes.
Yeah.
But Charles has been doing it as well recently. So if you're looking at the long term, I'm not sitting here saying Ferrari should get rid of both their drivers, but you've got to be looking at it. Red Bull and Mercedes, you look at their driver lineups, how they're performing at the moment. You're trying to get good performances out of two guys that want the best from Ferrari. Had that awful year last year where they thought we can be champions in March, and by June they were like, well, we're not even going to challenge for the championship. So I think there's a lot going on there behind the scenes. Obviously, Binotto's gone. I think it's just rough at Ferrari right now. I spoke to somebody who's very close to Sainz this weekend, and I got the impression that things are just they're kind of treading water in a lot of ways at this point. Culturally, a lot of things are changing. Obviously, the car's not where they want it to be, and I think that all in all, I think every race is just a bit of a slog at the moment for them.
The same could be said for Mercedes. I mean, after yesterday's qualifying, you saw bad quote after bad quote. They seemed very dejected, a word you used for Ferrari. And then today, I guess they impressed or surprised a lot of us who were expecting possibly more bad form.
Yeah, this is the confusing thing about Mercedes at the moment, and I think they're as confused as anyone. So it's
I
funny.
want to hit him with this pillow. Figure it out.
Yeah, and I mean, Toto Wolff, I've been going to his media sessions throughout the season, and sometimes you have these real low ones where it feels like the whole world is imploding on them.
When he goes low,
Yeah,
man.
I worry about him.
Charles
It's an
Leclerc
abyss.
went slow.
Yeah, it's this is the worst car ever. And okay, I won't say the word he used because he was off the record, but yeah, imagine the worst possible word you can have for a Formula One car. That's what he called it on Saturday. And then today it kind of came together, and the drivers did a good job for sure. Ferrari struggled a bit, so it's all relative, isn't it? But yeah, it's still a long way off, and they are really looking forward to this Imola upgrade. And really what Toto was saying is that it might not cure all the problems. It's not going to put them in the fight with Red Bull, but what it will do is just eliminate a few of the question marks they have over this car. They're going to take away some of the things that they think are really holding them back, and hopefully create a better platform to progress forward. It's not the platform, if they could start again completely, they would start with. They're going to have to wait till next year for that, because they just do not have the possibility within the budget cap to completely redesign the chassis and go again. But this, they're hoping they'll learn some lessons from, and if it works well and it creates a platform and they get some learnings from it over the next few races, it could be enough to see them start to edge away from Aston Martin and Ferrari, of course depending on what those two teams bring as well.
Let's go through best of the rest from who you saw perform today.
Oh,
Alpine certainly bounced back after.
Yeah, Alpine's probably the pick there if you had to,
Especially given the last two races, really not maximising their pace.
Yeah.
Ocon and Gasly both said yesterday the key here is we've just got to get points on the board. We've got to get both cars to the finish. And I think really, if you look at it realistically, that's probably their best finish. So I'd say that's a good pick.
Kevin Magnussen for me. I
Yeah.
mean, fourth in quali, and then obviously picking up that point. And yeah, he was racing Leclerc lap after lap, and it almost felt like there was potentially a better result in there. But you got to be realistic about where Haas are, and obviously with Stroll not being among the top 10. I'm right in saying that. I know my mind's just gone blank. Obviously, he was the guy that slipped in there and took the final point on offer when you've got the Red Bulls, the Ferraris, the Mercedes, and the Alpines, and the Aston Martins taking up points positions.
With K-Mag, when that was going on, Lawrence and I, we're both big fans of Kevin. Aggressive racer.
Can I just say Nate is a much bigger fan of
Yeah,
Kevin than I do like Kevin. I do like
K-Mag.
Kevin, but Nate especially.
I love K-Mag. I think he's great. Great personality because he's just very Scandinavian. But when he races, he's always raced the same way. But one thing I noticed today, and I know we'll get onto them, the driver intros. Kevin had a huge reaction from the fans here. He was one of the loudest. And again, loudest from where I was, but my vantage point, there were some drivers who didn't even register anything.
There was one that got boost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ooh, I wonder who it could have been.
Save that for later.
Yeah, we'll save it for later
By
on.
the way, you'll never be happier than a Scandinavian in Miami.
Yeah,
Never.
Yeah.
All of the Scandinavian drivers, when they come here, just glow. They're thrilled.
I will say I was hopeful that Valtteri Bottas would be in this discussion of best of the rest. After starting in the top 10, he finished P7 a year ago here in the Alfa Romeo, had some success. Unfortunately, just not his race. But I think Alpine bouncing back certainly is a good storyline to continue to follow to see if they build this momentum and keep it going in Imola as well as K-Mag. Because Nico Hülkenberg has outperformed him to a degree up until this point, so it was really nice to see him get in the points. Let's head to the Doghouse segment. That's because it's been a long day in Miami.
It really
at
has
this
been.
point, I'm getting slap happy as things are being
Crashing?
packed up here from
Yeah.
all of the different garages. Who would you put in the Doghouse? And intros are fair game.
Oh, okay. Intros are fair game. Well, I'm going to leave the intros alone because I actually liked the intros. I liked the idea of the intros. I haven't actually fully been able to watch the whole thing yet, I'll let one of these guys do that if they want to. I'm going to put Lance Stroll in there because I think, the pace of that Aston Martin, how good that car is, how much Alonso got out of it. Obviously, Lawrence explained why Stroll was in the position he was in qualifying. But, if you're in a car like that, you've got to be putting it in the top 6. And I think we're starting to see the disparity between Alonso and Stroll more and more each weekend. Still massive respect for the way he started the season with all his injuries and stuff, but I think it's been long enough now that you can start to say that that's not, it's not a factor anymore. So, I'd stick Stroll in there.
I'm going to put McLaren in there because the
That's
performance wasn't there, and this is the race after they brought their big update, which was meant to be, this is where we should have been right from the start of the year. Watch us kind of move back towards the top 10 and start scoring points again. And in Baku, you could forgive them a little bit. They were actually fairly competitive in Baku, but you could forgive them a bit because they had that one practice session. Here they had 3 practice sessions and just never really got it together. To be honest, I need to dig into it a bit to find out the exact reasons. I didn't make it along to much of their media, but I don't know if either of you guys know why it was missing so much.
Lando, it was an annoying situation. Our mix zone, I was so far away from Lando, I couldn't quite hear everything he said. But he keeps saying this same phrase. He keeps saying the problems that we've been saying are in the car, we now know are in the car. So he keeps saying, we've been saying these problems are here, we've been saying these problems are here. And even now, it's clearly not setup issues. I think there's fundamental issues still at play
do
with
you
that
think
car.
he's frustrated that he doesn't feel like they're being listened to as drivers?
I think potentially. I mean, we heard Lewis Hamilton say similar, didn't we? He said Mercedes didn't listen last year to what I wanted. And I think Lando, what you hear about him is he's a very vocal guy with his feedback to the team. And obviously, it's not a situation where they can change things quickly. I think for him, the frustration is this is another wasted year.
Yeah.
And he's got to sit through. He's got to listen to the same questions. But he was really dejected today. I've not seen him like that for a while. So yeah, he's another one. Like the Ferrari boys, just in a really tough situation.
It was a bad day at the kids' table. It was a bad day for the rookies overall, especially for Logan Sargent. I know it's his home territory. I'm sure he was hoping for a better performance than that. I know everyone finished, but not a great day for Project Patriotism in terms of let's get some electricity surrounding the American. It was a learning experience. Let's be charitable. It was a learning experience for Logan Sargent today.
But I think that's fair. I was going to stick him in the Doghouse tentatively because
I think that's fair,
and I know realistically, what can we expect from the Williams? I was hoping for better than P20 in qualifying as well as where he finished today, just in front of his home crowd being 20, 30 minutes away up the street in Fort Lauderdale. For your first American race, it just didn't feel like the greatest showing that possibly could have been. Let's discuss the intros because obviously a lot of drivers took issue with it. If you missed it at the top of the race before, LL Cool J, Grammy winner?
Sure.
Shirley's.
Sure.
And also he's
whatever
from Deep Blue Sea.
Yeah, great movie,
great
by
movie.
the way.
Great movie.
I'm glad you brought that up.
I love that film.
love shark movies. Anyways,
Yeah,
we'll
same.
do a different pod on that.
That's a whole new pod we should start.
Thank you. Deadliest Catch, into that?
Yeah,
Do you
love
guys
that,
get
love
that over? Okay.
Yeah, love that.
Anyways, LL Cool J practice announcing every single driver. They came out with the Miami Dolphins cheerleaders. There was, I think, an orchestra kind of involved. And the crowd got to applaud them before coming out and obviously getting to the grid. A lot of issues because drivers said I didn't have time to mentally prepare. I didn't have time to have conversations with my engineers like I normally would. It wasn't my normal routine prior to getting into the car and getting my helmet on. How do we feel about the intros? Obviously, it's there for entertainment, but at the end of the day, they are trying to achieve a goal, and that's win a race.
Yeah, so F1 did change the schedule so that they had an extra 10 minutes to account for this presentation. And they actually did that in Baku last weekend. So in that race where they didn't have a presentation, but they had the extra 10 minutes, all the drivers were complaining that they were hanging around, they had nothing to do and all this kind of stuff. Then they gave them something to do, which I thought was kind of cool. And
I thought it was well done.
And it was way better than the one we had in Austin a few years ago, which was really drawn out. That went on a very long time. This one I felt it was they got through it. Will.i.am conducting like this orchestra. I mean, that was to everyone's, well, not to everyone's taste, but
to ours.
Yeah, but still, like I thought it was okay. And look, it is a show. Like some of the drivers are saying, well, this just shows that it's too much of a show and all this kind of stuff. It's like, no, it is a show. Like that's the only reason that this sport is as big as it is, that we're here in Miami with this gigantic paddock around a football stadium, is because of the fans. It's because of the interest that kind of stuff builds up. So I don't think it's too much to ask for the drivers to take an extra 10 minutes in their schedule at that point. But
no, I completely agree, and you're right about the show, mate, because a lot of these drivers have become household names because of a Netflix documentary that showed the show element of Formula One. That's what has made it famous. Some drivers, I get it, drivers want to be in the zone and all that stuff, but Formula One has got all of these races now in different territories, 3 in America, you've got so many across the world, and we keep hearing from Formula One and team bosses, etc., that the way these races are going to stay on the calendar long term is by forging out their own identity. Mm-hmm. Christian Horner had a great quote to us today. Lawrence and I both went down to his media session. He was like, some drivers won't like high-fiving celebrities and walking through dry ice when they come in. Was it dry ice? Is that the right word? The smoky ice, is that dry ice?
A smoke machine.
Yeah,
right?
Whatever. Yeah, he said something like that. But he said you're not going to see that in Silverstone. He said you're never going to see that in Silverstone because Brits are too cynical for that kind of thing. He said you might if they're wearing like a suit and a bow tie, the drivers. But every event needs to have something that's uniquely local to it. Now I know that's not Miami necessarily, but it's very American, and it felt like more of a Super Bowl style show than it did like a British Grand Prix or something. And I think as long as events stay true to where they're from, they do things that make you feel like it's a race there. Like one of the worst things we always used to say is we always hate soulless Grand Prix like Sochi in Russia. Yes, it was in Russia, but there was just nothing really to it. This race, it had something. It's a bit like the fake marina. Everyone's talking about it. They love it. They hate it. Everyone's talking about it. And I think Miami 2 years running have found something that divides people in that way. And I think that's not a bad thing.
Those are all great points. I still support anyone's desire to complain about their job at any time, no matter how much they're paid. And that's fine. So if they want to do that, that's awesome. Let them. I support labor. If they want to complain, excellent. They still have to do it. That's fine. Yeah. It's part of the gig. But if you want to complain about it, that's fine. That's more color. It also adds comedy next year when they still have to do it, and I know how much Lando Norris hates it.
Yeah.
And he still has to smile and wave.
Well, also, it's okay.
Is that the hill you want to die on?
Yeah, right. Like, because George Russell was, I had to stand in the sun for too long. I was like, come on. I mean, look, I know that's frustrating.
He's very pale.
Yeah, well, there is that. There is that to it. But again, like with this, I saw a lot of people on Twitter complaining who probably weren't American. They're saying, oh, this is terrible for a European fan. It's like, well, it wasn't made for you. I don't particularly enjoy Drive to Survive, I'll be honest with you, but it's not made for me. I'm someone who's been watching Formula One my whole life.
Sure.
I cover it. I watch it and I'm like, this isn't for me, but that's fine. So
and if the race in America is Americanized, like,
yeah, right,
why is that a surprise to anyone?
If we turn up to Monza
exactly.
and you have to sing, sorry, we're going to do the Star Spangled Banner before we race, I'm like, all right, this Americanism might be going
steady
too far.
on.
Yeah.
There was a little tone there with the Star Spangled
I sung it, by the
Banner.
way. I sung it on the grid. I love that anthem, so no issue with it. But in Italy, my point being that it would be weird. Yeah. Great anthem, by the way. Top anthem.
Thank you. We stole it.
Yeah. Oh, we're British. Check out our museums. Everything's
all right, before we okay.
Sorry,
hold
anyway.
on. Is the Miami Grand Prix going to be moved to a night race?
Not immediately. They are looking at it though.
You two are bad.
Yeah, sorry. We just keep looking at each other like, what more mischief can we bring to this pod?
They are looking at it, but it's so far away, so far down the path. They think maybe, because it is hot here. I mean, the drivers won't be complaining about standing in the sun if the sun's gone down, right?
Standing in the moon for too long.
Exactly. Under the floodlights. But I don't think it's realistic anytime soon. But again, it's it would kind of suit the race a little bit, I think. But I'm not sure about night races everywhere. We've got a lot of them already. I don't think this one needs to be a night race. And when you have the Florida weather like we have throughout most of this weekend, it looks great. Like the cars pop in the sunlight, the runoff nice and blue and all that kind of stuff. It all just looks right with the palm trees. I think under lights it wouldn't look so good.
And also with Vegas being a night race, again, when you're talking about setting yourself apart, I think as different as this race can feel to Vegas, I think in the long run for Miami is going to be a good thing.
It's been so enjoyable being back in person with the two of you, with you as well, Spencer. Thank you guys so much for...
Are we not going to mention the predictions that we made
Lawrence
Wait.
hasn't stopped
on
talking about
Thursday?
this.
On Thursday.
Yes.
We made some predictions about who's going to be on the top
Yes,
three.
we did. You
Yes, we
added
did.
Fernando Alonso
I
into
did.
your top,
Yeah,
and you
as
picked both
third.
Red Bull drivers.
I picked both Red Bull drivers, with Max Verstappen first,
What did
Sergio
I
Perez
do?
second.
I can't remember. I know
Fernando
I
Alonso
said
third.
Verstappen wouldn't finish, so I think I can politely...
Well, you know what?
Stand down.
Stand up and take your freaking bow right in front of that camera, man.
Are you letting him
Well
take a?
done.
Are you letting him take a bow for betting on
Unbelievable.
death and taxes? Like,
I'll just
that's-
point out, I nailed the first two and I didn't get anything like that.
Yeah.
So,
I
you know,
but
bit of
what?
favouritism.
You're in the lead right now.
Yeah,
so.
true.
First
And,
person
and
to
he's
get
wearing
every
a hat,
single one
which
right.
is- which
We're
is
a
amazing.
visor.
well,
Sorry,
you
You're wearing the bucket
get a
hat.
round
Yeah.
for that.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Continue to do so because we really appreciate it. Cheers.